This is a video for homework 3, problem 5. So they changed this problem a little bit in the text. It used to be just 9.1.25, and then they added this T. And I believe what they added when they added the T was this whole B section here. So we're going to go over that. First of all, we have a survey of 2,297 adults in a certain large country, aged 18 and older, conducted by a reputable polling organization, found that 411 have donated blood in the past 2 years. So first things first, yours is going to have slightly different values, but we're going to do this in the exact same way. So the first thing we need to do is obtain a point estimate. And the point estimate for a population proportion is just the sample proportion. So to calculate that, what we're going to do is we're going to take the number of successes, which is 411, and divide by the number in the sample, which is 2297. So I'm just going to go ahead and open up a calculator here just in Google. It works out very well. And here is our calculator. So again, that was, I believe, 411 divided by 2297. So 411 divided by 2297. Now they wanted me to round to the third decimal place. So if I look here, this is an 8. So if I look to the right, it's a 9. The rule is 5 or above, you round up. 4 or below, you stay the same. So we are going to put this 8 to a 9. So 0.179. Let's just check to make sure we're correct here. Yep, and I got the same answer here. And this is just, the notation here is that this is p hat. It looks like it has a little hat on it, and p hat represents the sample proportion. Now for this next part, this can be a little confusing. There are lots of choices here. There are lots of drop-down menus. One thing that I highly recommend is in your question help section, using the view an example option. Now, some of you have been saying that you don't really love the new interactive text. It can be a little confusing. It's hard sometimes to find the exact thing that you want. So view an example is like reading a text. You can also use Help Me Solve This, but Help Me Solve This is going to take off points for using it. It'll take half credit, and then you'll have to do similar question down the bottom here when you're done to get full credit. But view an example doesn't take off any points, and it reads just like a text. And one reason I really like View an Example is, number one, it's going to show you all your formulas and explain the formulas. So here, for example, they talk about the point estimate being p hat equals x over n, where x is the number of individuals in the sample with a specified characteristic, and n is the sample size. If you continue, it's also going to tell us what we need for the constructing a confidence interval. So this is what I want to look at. The requirement for constructing a confidence interval about p, which is the population proportion, are that the sample is a simple random sample. That's number one. It has to be a simple random sample. The value of n times p hat times 1 minus p hat is greater than or equal to 10, so that is condition number 2. And then the sample size is less than or equal to 5% of the population size. And if you hear the planes above, I apologize. I live right next to Logan Airport, so you'll hear them often. I think we have a lot of takeoffs happening right now. Okay, so let's take a look at what we have here. The first thing is that we need to have a simple random sample. Now in our problem, it doesn't say that they took a simple random sample. However, it does say that it was conducted by a reputable polling organization. So if we're saying, okay, it's not saying right away that this is a simple random sample, but it was conducted by a reputable polling organization, we can assume that it's a simple random sample because we would assume that they're doing their sampling correctly. Now I believe that the choices here were can be assumed to be, cannot be assumed to be, and then I believe is stated to be and is not stated to be. So of course, again, this was not stated, but we're going to assume that it is because it was conducted by a reputable organization. Now next, you had to choose the correct formula here, and they gave lots of different formulas. This is why, again, having that question help is really helpful. We want to pick n times p hat times 1 minus p hat. Now then we have to actually calculate that. Okay, so remember, n is your sample size. P hat is this 0.179 here. Now I'm going to show you something. I didn't get rid of my previous calculation because we can actually use it in our little calculator here. So I need to do n times p hat, so I'm just going to click in. N, I'm sorry, was 2297. So I'm going to do 2297. I have to multiply that by p hat, which is the previous answer that I had here. So see how I already have it up here? So instead of plugging that in, or I'm going to be a little lazy here, but sometimes I don't even want to round when I do these calculations, because the more exact you are, the more likely you are to get it correct in my stat lab. I'm going to press answer, and that's going to actually be able to use that previous one. Parentheses 1 minus p hat, so I'm going to do 1 minus my answer. And again, you could just type it in if you want to do 0.179, but I'm just going to use the answer button because my answer is already in there, and press equals. So I'm getting 337.46. Let me just go back here. And that's what they were getting, 337.460, and they were rounding to 3 decimal places. And again, the reason they're keeping this a 0 is because next to it is a 1. Anything that is 4 or below, we just stay the same. And people often ask, do I really need the 0? And the answer is yes. When you're asked to round to a certain decimal place, if you didn't have the 0 here, it would be assumed that you were rounding to 2 decimal places, not to 3 decimal places. Okay, so it is important. We do talk about things like significant figures and stats. It's good to make sure that you are going ahead and having the correct rounding. Okay, now again, I would go back to question help if you can't remember that whole spiel, right? But this n times p hat times 1 minus p hat, we want it to be greater than or equal to. So again, there are lots of choices here. When you go to that drop-down menu, it was either greater than or equal to or less than. You do want to pick greater than or equal to. So this is also meeting it. 337 is greater than or equal to 10. And also, we have to pick that the sample size, now notice it says can be assumed to be. First of all, they said sample size or population proportion or population size, but we're talking the sample size. So our sample size here is 2,297 results. Now, again, we're at this whole can assume to be or is stated or whatever. It's not stated that the sample size is less than 5% of the population size. However, they did say it was a certain large country, right? Now, when you think of a large country, I mean, if you think of the United States, for example, has a lot of people. And I'm just going to, quickly Google what is the population of the U.S. And if we look here, it's like 327 million, okay? So if you were to figure out what, for example, 2,297 is compared to 327 million, it's definitely less than or equal to 5% of the population size. So we're going to assume, again, we're assuming here, I'm just using the US as an example, they just said a large country. The sample size can be assumed to be less than or equal to 5% of the population size. And again, I know this was a difficult thing to do unless you had that those conditions written. So take a look at that question help. The view and example is a great thing to look through. Okay, last one is to construct this confidence interval. And to construct your confidence interval, we are going to use StatCrunch because doing this out by hand is really no fun. So we're going to go to question help and open this up in StatCrunch. Oh, my login expired. I'm going to have to log in again. Okay, let's see if I can do this. I'm going to pause and come back and hopefully be able to put these two videos together. Okay. So I apologize for having to have different numbers here. Unfortunately, my stat lab kicked me out and I wasn't able to finish the last problem. So we're going to go ahead and do letter C with these two values here. And again, all you need are these two values. You're going to need X, you're going to need N, and you're going to need what % confidence you'd like. So we're going to go to question help and we're going to go to StatCrunch and hopefully it will let me do that now, please. And yes, it does. Okay, so next thing you're going to do is you're going to click Stat. You're going to go to Proportion Stats, one sample, and with the summary. We don't have all the data listed. We have the summary. We have X and N. So then we're going to say our number of successes, which in this case was 429. Again, I apologize for the different numbers. And then your number of observations, which is 2295. 2295. And then we're going to say we want a confidence interval, and I can't remember what %. We want 90% confidence. So I'm going to put 90 here. And click Compute. And this is going to give you all the values that you need. So we have our sample proportion, which again, you could have put that here. We had just calculated it in our Google Calculator. We have our standard error. And we also have our lower limit of our confidence interval and our upper limit. And again, I think we're rounding to 3 decimal places here. Yes, 3 decimal places. So 0.17, that 3 is going to turn into a 4, so 0.174, and 0.200, which I believe is the same thing they got here. Now, as for which one of your statements to go ahead and choose, we never want to say there is a blank percent chance. That's not what it is. So we're not saying that there is a certain percent chance that the proportion of adults falls between two values. We're saying that we're 90% confident that the proportion of adults falls between two values. This doesn't have to do with the chance of it actually falling in. What a confidence interval does, and again, you might want to look in your interactive text, they have a pretty good little video on this, is that if I were to create and take a sample, supposedly, and it has a lot of mathematical calculation to do with it. But if I were to take 100 samples, out of 90, 90 of them would probably contain our true population proportion. We still do not use the words there is a blank percent chance. We want to choose we are 90% confident that the proportion of adults is between a certain percentage and another certain percentage. So again, I apologize, it had to be a little bit choppy. The first couple times that I went to go ahead and do this, I had interruptions by children. So, and then it kicked me out because I took too long. But if you have any more questions on this, please let me know, and I'd be happy to help.